Thank you. Good evening. Happy Friday Eve. We're going to jump in, 5 o'clock, get started, and have some conversation. So thank you so very much for being here for our first town hall of the school year. Again, this is a practice we started last year, which we felt was successful because we were able to have a dialogue. So again, thank you for being here tonight. With that said, there are a couple things that we're going to go through. We're going to first talk about, obviously, the why we do the things that we do and what's going on operationally, managerially, and instructionally. And then open it up for questions and conversation. I think last year we started to do that. This year we want to do a little bit better with those questions and comments and conversations. So there will be a moment where there's a note card if you need a note card or something like that to come around and write down your questions so that we can actually have a back and forth on things that are on your mind. So with that said, my parents actually this summer went to Alaska. They had a chance to go see one of these, an iceberg. And it put an image in my head as we think about the work that we're doing every single day. This is probably what most families, parents, people see. They see the top, everything above the water, things that happen in schools every single day. That's the top of this iceberg. But when you look at an iceberg and really understand how big an iceberg actually is, the mass of it is below the water. Most of the things that are going on and are happening are below the water. There's so much going on that you actually do not see. So I want to provide you some of the things that you do not see and understand why we do the things we do, so the top of the iceberg, the top of what we do, makes a little bit more sense. Follow me so far? The second thing I also want to do is make sure that we flip this iceberg. So the things that we are actually doing behind the scenes are things that are not secret. They're very open. They're very transparent around what's going on and why we do the things we do. So there is no question. I think a lot of times when you see or read different things in the newspaper, you see that I don't comment on a lot of things because I don't want that to be a space where you don't get to hear directly from me. So that's why I flip the iceberg this way. So I'm glad you're here tonight. So with that said, there's a bunch of systems that make us work. There are a bunch of things that help us operate and move in a direction that makes sense. However, at the same time, there's 2 pathways we could go down as we think about building a system to create the change we want to see. One of the most notorious systems to be underperforming, or ones that do not work, is this place. Right? All of you either chuckled or laughed or have an experience about what happened when you went to the BMV. Right? So I had experience doing that too, very recently, and actually it was earlier today where I said, just walk me through the process of getting new license plates and new tags, right? And so here's what happened. True story. Everything in here is a true story. I went online, Googled. I had to call three BMVs. Three BMVs. The first 3 got busy signal. Got no one, no answer. I got to the 4th one, and once I got to the 4th one, they told me that I needed to call a different number. So I finally got a person, they told me to call a different number. I called the 5th place, and they told me, okay, here's what you need to do. First, you have to go to the title office, and then come back to the BMV to get this paperwork, and then come back to us to verify what the other office said. Then, after that, I called again another office, and they said, once you have all that done, we can give you your tags, but we can't give them to you because after today, we're closed for 6 weeks. Right? I wouldn't say that's an effective system. Fair? On the other side, hospitals. When we think about the care of hospitals and the purpose of hospitals, it is to make us better. Now, I won't say these are perfect systems, but I will say that they're improved compared to the story that I just gave you. This gentleman was a doctor in 1846 who was trying to improve our hospitals by doing something very simple. He was a doctor who was helping with childbirth, and when women were coming into the world with their young person, he was a doctor going to the field to deliver babies. He was delivering babies at a hospital while midwives were delivering babies at home. But he found very quickly that kids were dying in hospitals at a rate, mothers were dying at hospitals at a rate of 5 times faster at a hospital than with a midwife. He didn't understand why that was happening, so he said, what is it that's causing this? And he realized very quickly that the doctors and the people that were training in hospitals were learning about childbed fever, which were killing the mothers, by looking at the cadavers of the mothers that had passed. And what was happening is when they were doing that with those deceased mothers, they were getting things underneath their nails and then delivering babies. And the only way that he found that out is because he then started to find that mothers weren't the only people dying of childbed fever. It was actually people that came in contact with it. And he said, you know what? We need to wash our hands. His simple solution to all of this was to wash our hands. But the reality of the situation is, even though they were washing their hands, they still were a lot like this system because people didn't buy in. They didn't believe that washing your hands would actually help the situation for mothers. And until they were actually to improve and believe that it was possible that washing your hands would be the difference, they became a stronger institution. Why do I bring this up? I think about our kids and what we're trying to do every single year, and that is to get our kids to a place in this world to be successful in life post-high school. But here's the current reality in our schools. I had a chance to dig into a whole bunch of numbers and find out about a scenario. And this is an isolated scenario of an individual that I'm pointing out, but this is indicative of a larger number of kids who are seniors right now. A portrait of a scholar in the high school right now is this. 9 out of 9 state tests that this individual has taken, and again, this is an individual that is repeated multiple times over. 9 out of 9 state tests they have taken, they have been identified as limited on every single one. 23 times between 2013-14 and this present year, they were given a D or an F. This person currently has a 1.0, but has 15 credits and is slated to graduate. Something doesn't work. That system doesn't quite make sense to me. It sounds like this one, right? So when you think about all the things that we're trying to do right now, it is to make sure that narrative, that portrait, becomes something different. And more about what this gentleman was trying to do in hospitals and getting people to wash their hands. Now the difference is now people realize the importance of washing their hands. They've huddled up, they put their hands together, they realize, no pun intended there, they put their hands together and realize we collectively have to make this difference. So if you were to go in a hospital today, you would be hard pressed to find a space where you don't see that in that red circle, a place where you can have hand sanitizer or some kind of things to clean your hands. How many people have been in a hospital and seen those everywhere? Because as you realize this, as this person walks further and further and further down the hall, they're touching something, someone, something that's going to make a person sick or make them better. They better have clean hands doing that. That's the same thing for the work we do as our kids move from step to step to step closer to graduation. We have to make sure we're taking the right precautions to make them successful. That's our why. So, the experience we had last year when we were all down in Columbus and having a good time and we were in the same huddle celebrating our kids on the basketball court, it's time to celebrate our kids in the classroom and put everything else behind us. And here's how we're going to do it. First, experience joy. So earlier this year we had a teacher convocation and it was a lot of fun. And I might be a little bit biased because I had a lot of fun, and teachers that were there, a lot of them also had a lot of fun because it was an experience, and school leaders had a lot of fun doing this because it was a chance for us just to be ourselves and to experience joy in a way that I actually, to be very honest, and school leaders are sitting, some of them are sitting here now, I didn't know they were going to bring it the way they did. I mean, there were shirts, there were chants, there were skits. It was amazing to see how many people were just there to celebrate their school the first day collectively. It was powerful. And they realized in that moment, in that time, we realized this quote to be true. Like, if we're ever going to accomplish anything we need to do, it's going to be collectively. Regardless of how you feel or maybe the sentiment you might have or something that might be bothering you, we have to come together. So here's how we can do that. Maybe. So this is a slide from last year, a promise that I made to you all. I will always bring you the information that you need at the time that I can and with honesty and integrity. Anything that I tell you will be honest, driven by data and honest to its core. So here's some things that we'll talk about. We'll talk about instructional updates first. We'll go to managerial things and then into operational things, starting academically because that's what we're here and what we're about. I'll go very quickly through number 1 and number 2, but number 3 has some depth because I know this is something that has been brought up and concerns that have been laid around scholar behavior, and then of course, standard-based grading. So academic academy development. This is something just to rehash where we ended the last year. We had a conversation around our transition as a high school from our old traditional 9th through 12th grade model to eventually getting to a space of having all full academies. And in short, all I'm calling out here is that this year we had Titan Academy, we had a Success Academy, and we have our 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, like traditional 10th and 11th and 12th grade, with the intent that next year, as we start to grow this out, we'll have more and more of our academies put in place. In particular, arts and media and civic engagement, social justice academies will be put in place next year. So I pull this out because by 2021, 22, we want to see that 9th grade class, no pressure, Brian Hilko, as you just walk in. But that 9th grade class is the first class that we're expecting all of them to walk across the stage, receive a graduation diploma, and then also receive an associate's degree or industry credential 4 years from now. That is the first class that will have that experience in totality. With that said, we need help doing that. We need help having conversations around what that looks like. Last year, I proposed these 4 pictures to you, and the process we'll go through, the brainstorming stage, we're going to plan, we'll incubate, and then we'll actually go. The first phase, and the thing that's most important for those that are in this room, we need help brainstorming and planning. We're right where we need to be to start planning for next year around these academy models. The first thing we will need, and we'll do, and we actually will have a trip middle of October to see our first excellent school. We're actually traveling to Idea Public Schools in San Antonio to see some public schools who are doing great things and are performing at a high level. That's our first step. Our second step is finding experts locally who are able to help build out those models. For example, the Arts and Media Academy, we've had already some initial conversations with Oberlin to help us think through what this model could look like. And looking for other folks you might know who might help us be the brains behind the development of those models, and then getting community buy-in and involving our scholars in this process. That's where I need all of your help to get to with the brainstorming stage. So the next few weeks, there'll be some emails coming from the MAC team to start the process of thinking through what those academies should, will, and could look like, so that we can get to a space 8 weeks from now for the next 12 to 16 weeks to just plan. Just to make sure the plan is right, make sure that Mr. Garvey and his team feel prepared for the following year in the rollout of these academies, and then be prepared to be successful with those academies. Second piece here is the laptop rollout. You see a picture here of a scholar and their mother. The mother is probably more excited here, as you can see in this picture, than maybe the scholar, getting their laptop. The intent of getting laptops to our kids originated from 2 things. One, it is in my heart and in my soul that none of our kids get anything less than any other child in America. My dad teaches in a district, one of the most affluent districts in Pennsylvania called Tredyffrin East, and it is just outside of Philadelphia, if you know anything about Philadelphia, called the Main Line. So the Main Line has $1 million homes and very wealthy kids, and parents go to this school. And every kid in that school goes to not just college, they go to Harvard, they go to Yale, they go to the best schools in Pennsylvania because of all the things they're afforded along the way. One of those things is technology. I hate the fact that our kids, just because of where their zip code lands and where they are born, that they don't have these resources. So the intent of getting these resources in their hands was to make sure that we can say, our kids too have those resources. We just now have to figure out, make sure we're using those resources right. But we weren't going to stop because our kids don't have the resources, they need them. But here in the slide, you see the number of laptops that have been picked up by grade. We still have a bunch of laptops that haven't been picked up at this point. So if you know a parent or a scholar and a parent who haven't picked up their laptop, just remind them there's a few more days coming up where they can still pick up their laptops. We've had 11 different days, including a Saturday, where a great team of folks, some of them are here, who were here for hours, just getting 1,000 or so folks came in to get their laptops. So there have been 11 days so far to get your laptop, and there's a few more still to go. With that said, again, this is all in preparation, getting our kids prepared to be successful in life. Here's the other challenge with this. This young man is very excited after graduation, and should be. The challenge is, we realize that is the focus and where we should be focusing our attention. I typically do not, and usually do not, cover your ears, Rick and Katie, I don't read the paper. Because there's a lot of things that are put in the paper that you just can't listen to, right? Whether you believe it or not, it's just hard to listen to. I choose not to, because I have a ton of things that I need to get done, right? The other piece is, there's stories that are told in the paper, there's stories that are put in different avenues that are factually inaccurate. And it's not the fault of these wonderful media outlets, let me be clear, it's not them, it's where they're getting potential information from. So I want to set the record straight with information, especially around scholar behavior. Over the past few days, there have been, to recap, there have been a few things. The gift and the curse of these things that fly around make a lot of information travel. And it's interesting how many people, which I love them dearly and would never express who they are, who send me, hey, Hardy, you should know this, or you should see this, because it's popping up in these places, right? I don't have Facebook. I just choose to go on it. The only thing I do is tweet. Instagram, it's confusing. I don't know what to do with those filters. And Snapchat, I heard your pictures disappear, so why would I use it? So I get information from other folks. But at the same time, the information that is being provided is unfortunately providing a slant to a situation that's just not fair and not focused on kids. And then it creates headlines like this. Or Channel 19, who said this. Now, I'm not knocking down the comments that are coming from those individuals who believe that to be true. I just want to make sure they have the truth. Is that fair? Because that's what they perceive. Let's just make sure we have the truth. So with all that said, in complete honesty, we have had fights at our high school. Absolutely have had fights. There's no denying that. There's no denying that we have to and continue to improve the quality of the learning environment in our high school. However, what is not true is that it is out of control. That is not true. And here's a few examples of that to make sure you understand and see. Very hard to read this table, but I gave you a snapshot here of the past 3 years of suspensions throughout the district. Please take your time. I'm going to leave this slide up for a while. Take a picture, whatever you need to do. The last 3 years of suspensions in Lorain. How are you? 2015, 2016, elementary, middle, high, and alternative academy. So that changed over time a little bit from credit recovery and new beginnings and all those things. So we just label that as alternative academy. So you see 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, which was last year, and then this current year. Then you'll also notice that it's broken down by quarter of each year. So when you think about a grading period, about 9 weeks is a quarter. So you see each quarter how many out-of-school suspensions occurred. Now, if I can, I think I left a piece of paper over here. I'll let you digest that for a second. Hopefully it's not an eye chart, but gives you some context and data. The last column I put over here, because I actually was curious to see the rate at which kids were getting suspended per day. So we have 178 days in a school year. So this last column actually gives you the average of students suspended per day at a school by grade level. Okay? So if I'm in elementary school in 2015, 2016, on average, there was 1.9 scholars suspended per day in 2015, 2016, as you move down the sheet. So the narrative right now says that this is true. The reality of the situation, when you actually add up the numbers and see the number of out-of-school suspensions, you will see, right down here, the first quarter, the first 4 weeks, we've had 6 out-of-school suspensions in elementary, 25 in middle school, 28 in the high school, and in our alternate academy, 5. 5. If you look at this time last year, this time after the first quarter, in those 4 areas, elementary had 114. Middle school, 118. High school, 164. And at our alternative academy, 96. 2018, the numbers are there. Now you're probably saying, okay, that's after 9 weeks, Mr. Hardy. That's not a full semester. That's not a full quarter. Completely understand. Hence why I did the average by day. Second, if you were just to say we're about the halfway mark, or I'll give you credit, like we're only 40% of the way there, and you add or double plus 5 to each of those numbers, we're still about 50 to 60% less as far as suspension related offenses in our schools. So when you hear that number, what is your reaction now? Different? The same?
Not as bad as No, or the behavior's still there, but the punishment is the not suspension?
Well, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah.
So here is, if you could.
Yeah, 'cause I'm a parent and I'm for my child being suspended if they break the rule.
So here is, if you don't mind, thank you for bringing that up. There was a question on the back of that. That's actually the data from 2018, 2019 that also codes fights and other incidents, right? So on that sheet, can you just read the one that says coded for fighting there?
Yes. Elementary school, 0. Middle school, 10. High school, 18. Alternative academy, 3.
3. So that actually breaks down the number that were just fights and the other offenses. So to your question, I heard you say, well, they're not getting caught for the other things going on. They are, because we actually separated in that second column the fights from everything else they're getting suspended for. Even with that, the numbers are still well below.
But you're lowering your standards as far as the punishment and
The punishment meaning?
You're lowering your, not you.
Okay.
I feel
It
the
would be.
schools are lowering their standards
Say what you mean by
as far as punishment, as far as
What they'll put up with.
consequences, as far as just to get by.
Interesting.
I mean,
Interesting, because here's the reality though. That's a great point. So some folks are saying, okay, so now you're lowering expectations and saying, you know what,
as
you're
far
letting
as
things slide.
penalized goes too.
So you're lowering things, you're saying that things are, you're just putting things under the rug is what I hear you saying, right? So if that's the case, those coded fights, if you were to go even a little bit deeper, and I'm glad that Mr. Harvey's here and folks from the high school, we've actually suspended kids for not even physically fighting. We've suspended kids because they verbally got into an altercation that we thought would turn into a fight. So in my mind, I actually think we're shifting that and saying we're actually being more stringent on expectations and making sure that our kids are accountable for things they're doing before they fight.
And where is anger management coming into?
Anger management as far as?
As far as the children being suspended for fighting?
Great question. So earlier this week, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, I sent out a letter to the community. If not, let's put it on the website, Mac Team, if it's not already up. In the letter, bottom paragraph, it talks about restorative justice. If you click on that link, that actually gives you all the steps we're taking to ensure that that anger management, those challenges that our kids are facing, are actually addressed after their suspension. Fair? Other questions? Yes?
I'm not very familiar with your charting or anything like that, and I appreciate how you separated the fighting from the other incidents. I actually have a special needs 6-year-old little boy that was suspended today for being autistic, and they wrote that he did something autistic. So my son's removed until Monday.
Gotcha.
And it was because the staff couldn't control or help or handle him. So if we have kids that are fighting, yeah, that's a problem. That anger management needs to be addressed. But I have a child that's suspended because the staff didn't know how to deal with him. And they even circled him because he's autistic.
May I?
Yes.
So I will say two things. So I don't know if you were able to hear that, ma'am? Are you
I
able to hear-
did, and
Okay.
anger management needs to be addressed while they're being suspended, not afterwards.
Gotcha. So I hear two, I just
So
want,
there's a lack of time.
yeah.
Okay, so they're being suspended longer now for not only maybe 3 or 6 days, they're being, what's happening in that time period as
Right.
far as
It's a great question.
managing them or their anger management or, I mean, academically, what's happening to them? They're
Right.
out of school.
Right. So I hear a couple different, kind of, it's a circuitous question, so I want to try to answer all parts. But I also just want to show you the opposite side, right? So we are taking suspensions very seriously, which was your first concern. And unfortunately, this is kind of some of the byproduct, which isn't fair in that sense. But we're good, we have good people here that will help answer this, and I think I saw Doreen come in. And she can have a conversation with you to speak very specifically with you about this. So with that said, that's the duplicity of that. But to your other part, so what happens when a kid is suspended, right? Why aren't we getting them help while they're on suspension? We can, we absolutely will. The problem is, that's part of the punishment, is being away from the learning environment for the things that you put in place or you put out there that endanger 2,000 other kids. I cannot afford to have a young person fight and be in that school and for 2,000 kids and families be dependent on the safety of their kids because of a bad choice that young person's making. And hence why we make that choice. Once they serve that suspension, reflect, that's when they go into our restorative practices. So if you click, I don't know, have you seen the letter?
No, I haven't.
So if you
I have a
could-
Special needs child, just
Okay.
like that.
So let's, I don't know if we can we pull the letter? If we can find the letter, we'll get you a copy
And
before
she
you
was
leave.
suspended as well for
Okay.
3 days, but
Okay.
nothing came about it.
Okay.
And, she was suspended and,
Okay,
no
so,
management, no follow-up from the teachers.
Okay.
No
And
homework
those-
sent home,
those are the things we need to hear, so I thank you. I thank you for bringing those to the forefront. If you could, before you leave, if that someone, Helena, can you just go over there and grab this scholar's name in the school? Just grab it real quick from her. We'll get you the letter, and we'll follow with that principal for you. Okay? Miss Lee?
Yes, may I say something? And I
Of course you can.
understand where everyone is coming from, but let's get to the root cause of the problems of our children. And let's get down, particularly, I'm going to deal with that elementary level. We have children who are coming realizing that 85 to 80% of our children in our school system are multicultural. Let's face that truth, number one.
they're from where?
We couldn't hear.
Hold on. Miss Lee, try. Here you go. I know you don't like the mic.
No, let's face and look at some of the root causes of why our children are behaving the way they are with the fights. Number one, let's face there's a number of things that, I feel that can be and should be done. Number one, particularly when our kids begin to enter into kindergarten, preschool, or prior to, there should be resources, and hopefully there will be resources available to those kids and those families. Another thing that we need to deal with, the root cause, is parental accountability.
Yeah.
We cannot just say it's the teacher's fault or the child's fault. We have children who are coming into our schools daily traumatized for whatever reason, whatever their environment may be at home, prior to, if they're hungry, whatever. But do we have somewhere, the teacher or whoever, to say good morning, or have the resources available in there to help that child? Because that child will let you know. Sometimes it's through fighting and their behaviors. Other times it may be because they want you to hear them and they want you to understand, and you don't. Simply because we don't know. And we don't have the resources available there for our children. Another is that we need to make the parents, whoever they might be, whatever that situation may be, to embrace them and have them to come in our school so that we can deal with our children as that village who really cares. Because the kids want to know who they are. Many of them are asking the question, who am I? When you were, say, 5, 6 years old, did you ever question who you were, where you came from, what your feelings were at that particular time? It's even more prevalent now in this day, in this society. And my hope is that we all come together and that we do have the resources available. And like the lady saying, we do not have them. Many of our kids are coming in who have problems with you, and I can sympathize with the autistic child. I have a great-grandchild who's autistic. These things have to be addressed not tomorrow, not next year, but now, today, when those kids begin to enter. The other thing, because of our multicultures, do we have classrooms where, say, they're in kindergarten, you say, good morning, how are you? And the child next to them say good morning in Spanish, and you have that other child to say it back in English, where they can interact with one another and to know that they have to get into a society here in the city of Lorain. And I love my city. But I know that there are problems that need to be addressed, and it's not just on one level. And I think that, as the lady says, the standards, what needs to be done, and it needs to be addressed, and particularly beginning, but the first day that child steps foot into school, or prior to know where it's coming, and to get these parents. First question to all of you, how do we get all of these parents engaged? I don't agree with many of them. I don't like what's doing. I don't like how I see my children coming to school, because they're all mine. And I think this is what we have to do, and we have to get those resources, Dr. Harvey, out here in this community that's available. We're getting funded to come into our schools and to help us with our children.
I really don't want to have to embarrass myself or say too much, but last year my son was a kindergartner. And he got, I believe, one of the highest scores in the state of Ohio on your test. I am a parent brought to my knees because I hear I'm trying to do whatever it takes.
I agree with you because I have a
I'm here.
who's autistic.
And I have a
They
bright
are
young man.
verbalized.
I don't have the resources to keep them in Lorain district.
Yes, we do.
So-
We do have them. They
So,
are there. I know they're there.
so let me say two things.
I'm a strong parent. My son is not doing, he is not unintended. My son is not practicing bad behavior. And I'm not saying that your daughter is, but you're here too. So I am a very strong parent and I'm trying to be involved. I was told that I can't go past the office anymore. I can't observe. I can't help my son in the classroom.
So-
My son right now is being traumatized. And he's practicing behaviors that I'm fearful of.
So one, thank you for being here, because that says a lot about how strong and how caring you are as a parent, right? That says a lot. Two, that earlier picture of us huddling and putting all our hands together, you have a village here that wants to support you and help you. Specifically, I'm looking at Lorain, I'm specifically looking at Jay, who can connect with you right now, so that we can get to the resources, and a couple of principals are here as well. So we want to get answers for you. So Jay, do you mind just taking Mom out for a second and just having a conversation on what she can get support on? Okay, thank you. With that said, again, I want to just highlight the difference, the narrative that we see around our suspensions and what the reality is, right? The narrative that we see in the paper and what is actually true about suspensions and the numbers that are exhibited. The second piece too is I always worry about perception. You know, numbers are one thing, but what does it really look like? You know, the narrative of, you know, it's out of control and there's just no order in any way is troubling because, you know, Mr. Garvey, you know, he probably, I'm in his building more than he probably wants me to be. Partially because I love walking the halls and I love being around our kids and seeing who they are, and I've been lucky enough to build some really cool relations with some of them who are just wanting to, Ms. Lee, to your point, someone to talk to. And some of the things that you hear and see with them are there are a lot of caring adults around them. Today was a big day. It was a lot of caring adults that made a big difference for our school and for our city and for our district. And it felt really good to see how many adults did. It's also interesting to note that there are a number of kids who are still asking for more adults to care. One young man I was in the cafeteria with one day. A lot of you know him. I think I can share his nickname because you won't know his first name, but Slim. In the cafeteria, so I see some chuckles. You know Slim. Slim usually stays by himself and is with himself in many ways. One day he looked frustrated, so I just went up to talk to him and see what was going on. And Slim said, you know, I was tardy. I hated being tardy. I don't want to be tardy. He had band first period, so he didn't want to miss band. And I said, what help? I mean, so he's like, stop spending so much money on making us, you know, when we're tardy, getting us in trouble, right? Because we get in trouble for being tardy. And I said, so Slim, what would you want us to spend our money on? He said, spend the money on getting more adults to care about us. His words, not mine. So, we have to think about that. And it's not, he said adults. He did not say teachers. He said adults. Everyone in the building, everyone throughout the district, he wants more adults that care about him. The other piece that was interesting, I pulled Eric, is Eric here? Eric, about 9:10, I came to him. I said, you know what, before we go into town hall, I actually want us to just go over to the high school, unannounced, and video clip a minute of what goes on. Unadulterated, here it is. And part of me was like, make it good, please, in my head, right? Because I didn't know what was going to happen. But I also had confidence the work that's being done at the high school, that it was going to be good. So Eric, honestly, I honestly said, can we go do this? And he said, sure. Wasn't preempted, not planned, but I trusted what was going on, that would be fine. So here's what was going on. Let me show you. Now, being the perfectionist that Eric is, he actually put a little music and a little slide at the end because he's artistically talented. But the raw picture and image that you'll see was just a random minute around 9, what was it, Eric, about 9:50 or something, I don't know, this morning. Sorry, I'm trying to give you volume, but it won't actually work with me. But you can see the images. Random transition. What did you all see?
Crowded halls.
Crowded high school, walk into class, kids in school. What else?
Kids smiling.
Smiling, right? What else?
Interacting with one another.
Interacting with one another, saying hello,
Wanting attention from the camera.
wanting attention from the camera. Yes, that is true. That is true.
Just trying to get to class.
Just trying to get to class, right? The other piece that I loved in here, which it was around 40 seconds or so, I don't know if you caught it, where there was a moment of a scholar and a teacher give a little fist bump, right, to show that they care about each other, right? Like those little things go a long way when you talk about the culture that is being created at the high school. It's really powerful. That is probably the busiest hallway, like that where it started is the busiest hallway in Lorain High. That T there, so you got to see like the raw data of what's going on in a transition, right? As we were going down the hallway, I also want to point out, which was a point of concern, and I think might have been a point of shared concern at some other point recently, around this point right here. This hallway leads to Success Academy. And there's been a lot of concern around mayhem happening at Success Academy. That was it. In that section, that's Success Academy. Questions? Sure. Okay, so I want to move on. I spent a lot of time there because I think it's very important. When I was lucky enough to be hired for this role, folks often commented about Lorain and how, what are you thinking going to Lorain and everything, the sky is falling in Lorain. And I actually, earlier this week, one of our high school scholars cut my hair. Yep, he sure did. Look, I'm still here. I'm in front of you, so it must have been okay. But no, he's actually a really good barber. So I went to his home studio. He cut it. I was like, you have a home studio? This is fancy. Maybe I should be coming here a lot longer. But anyway, he was cutting my hair, and he had a friend from Elyria there, and we were just talking. She had no idea who I was, none. We were just talking. I said, so why do you go to school in the area? She said, well, you know why. You're from around here. All the fights that happen and all the craziness that happens every single day. I was like, and so tell me what goes on, because I don't know. I don't see it. Yeah, there's fights, and like the other day I heard there were 17 fights in a day, and every 7th period there's this and that. I'm like, oh wow, we probably should tell the CEO about this. But the reality is that's the unfortunate narrative that was here when I first arrived, and unfortunately that's the narrative that is out here, but this is the truth. It's a lot different than what people believe. I put these 3 tweets up here to circle back to the social media aspect of it all. The reality of media and social media and how things get out, oftentimes the flashy, the negative seems to get the instant attention. But I actually did a little research on the top 3 tweets in 2017, the ones that stuck, the ones that people love the most. These are the top 3. One is actually funny. If you ever follow Wendy's is hilarious to follow on Twitter. But this is a person who said, how many retweets would I need to have to get free nuggets? 18 million was the response from Wendy's. That was number 1. The number 1 followed a favorite tweet. And number 2 was a picture of Barack Obama who was talking to some kids, sharing love. Number 3 is talking about what Penn State was going to do to provide funding for families that were struck by the hurricane that hit Houston. So I bring this up because even though the flashy narrative, the quick piece that people pick up as negativity in the short term, in the long term, love absolutely conquers all. Every single time. So that's why we do what we do. Standard-based grading. The other big question has been, what are we going to do differently to make sure our kids are getting the education they deserve? Right, ma'am? I think you were alluding to some of those pieces. One of the big shifts we are trying to make is to ensure that our kids are getting what they need to be successful. 3 things that are true. We realized that in the past, the story that I illustrated a little bit earlier was of a young person who has been pushed along through the system and is now in a place to graduate and will leave undereducated by the fault of a system, of years of a system, from top to bottom, everyone in between. They have been failed. Standard-based grading actually fundamentally makes us think about teaching and learning differently. Forces us to do things differently than we have in the past and teach to a standard in which the state says we must meet. The second piece standard-based grading does for us, we all have been in a classroom, those that have been teachers have seen kids in a classroom who are absolutely wonderful. Nicest kid in the class, come in and say hello to you, sit in the back of the room, and chill out. They don't pick up a book, they don't pick up a pencil, they just hang out. They sit in the back, and at the end of the quarter, they get an A. Why? Because they didn't disrupt class, they didn't cause any hassle, they get an A. Standard-based grading forces us to separate that grade out so they're getting a grade for their behavior, for their effort, and for their academic performance. So a young person now will walk out and say, you know what, and better yet, a parent can walk out and say, you know what, academically, you're struggling here. But your effort's good. Your behavior's good. Or the other way around, man, you're really smart, but can you get it together on the behavior side? Versus when they got one grade, it became blended into one number. And that one number would hide some things that we have to work on for our kids. So these 3 numbers, and they're numbers intentionally, are to show how our kids are mastering standards, how they're performing effort-wise, or they're giving us forth effort, and then of course their behavior. And we put it on a scale of 1 to 5 because it aligns with the state's way of state testing. So from limited to basic, proficient, so on and so forth. Parents, you will get a mini handbook that kind of gives you the breakdown of how this looks, but that's the intent behind standard-based grading. It'll look something like this once you receive it, so you can actually see how your kids are performing in grades with those 3 markers. And ultimately, our hope is to ensure that kids that now graduate, we can feel better about when they walk across the stage, that there are standards that are mastered that will prepare them for real life. And understand that there's things that we need to push on and get better. So that situations like this stay in the past. Do not remain to be the reality. We no longer can accept kids that are limited, give them 15 credits, and then send them out the door and say, congratulations, you graduated high school, and expect them not to do something that is a detriment to our country and to our city. That's standard-based grading. Going to move on to managerial things. Any questions around instructional? Yes, Ms. Latham.
Yes, my question is, to you, are we seeing to it that each one of our scholars, our council, and parents are coming in, the counselors, and they will know where they are in each grading period or each year prior to getting into middle school and high school?
It's a great question. My honest answer is no. We're not to the degree that we need to, right? I think there's some of that going, but not to the degree I hear you asking us to do. However, we had a great meeting on Friday. So the question was, are we meeting with parents around where kids are along the way, all of our kids, to make sure they understand? We had a great meeting on Friday to initiate and understand those pain points, hence why this slide is there. So I thank the team that put the data together that allowed us to see where our kids were. But it raised the question for us, who is going to be that graduation guardian for each one of our kids? Who is going to be the person who is ensuring that not only just their senior year, I mean, I love the fact that the data went all the way back to our current 9th graders. So this process begins when they enter our building in 9th grade to make sure they're getting the support they need through 12th. And Nancy and I actually had an ad hoc conversation today about 13th and 14th year of education. So when they leave us in high school, we still don't let them go yet. And so we want to figure out how to support them along the way. Josh, cover your ears. It might cost a couple extra dollars. He doesn't like that part. But I do know Josh would support the fact that it is for our kids. Any other questions? Instructional stuff. Cool. Managerial side, I'll go relatively quick. Updates around managerial pieces. The teacher incentive was something we attempted and proposed to a group of teachers. We're still waiting on the teachers union just to get back to us and see if they accept the idea. So we're just waiting on their vote, to be quite honest. So what I'm showing you is a proposal of what we gave out to our teachers. Because here's the reality. Last year alone, our teachers missed about 8,000 days. 8,000. Average teacher missed about 18.6 days, which equivocates to about a month, right? That forced us in our budget to build out a budget of $1 million for substitute coverage. So sub coverage alone, we budgeted for about $1 million. Is that fair? A little bit over. We were prepared for that. We said, though, we want our teachers with our kids every single day. We'd rather have our teachers than a substitute, because as we know, and I'll be the first to raise my hand, when there was a substitute in class, whoo, game time, right? Literally, right? So it's better to have our great teachers in our class every single day. So we said, you know what? What if we incentivized our teachers first and make sure that they were given some additional dollars to make sure that they are there every single day? And this is what we had come up with, realizing that our teachers also were serving on a couple different committees, which cost us another $250,000. So when you put these two pieces together and realize that we can now have weekly data meetings built into the day, we have our data days that happen every second Tuesday, and we have PD days 3 times a year, we can get all of those teams in play, save the $265,000, roughly $270,000, and we have about $1.25 million to spend differently. And we said, why don't we try to incentivize? Start with teachers, not end with teachers. Let me be clear. We want to address all other membership and unions as well over time. But starting with teachers, giving those numbers. And we said, you know what? Let's incentivize our teachers and give them $2,000. If you come every single day, 2,000 extra bucks. If you miss less than 3 days, we'll give you 1,500 extra bucks. If you miss less than 5 days, 1,000 bucks. That's the proposed plan to keep our teachers and getting our teachers there every single day. Just again, waiting for ratification from the teachers union, which I'm hopeful will happen. We then said, we can't stop there because there's a lot of great people that do great work across this district. We realize how hard, and you've seen and been to our beautiful buildings. You've seen the meticulous effort to make our buildings great. You hear and speak to some wonderful people in our offices. You see every single day the support staff that makes our schools great. We have to incentivize those behaviors as well over time. We also realize that we should hear from those unions and have conversations with that. So in the very near future, we will set up some committees to start discussing what that could look like for the 1920 school year, and keep the motivation pure around outcomes for kids and expecting excellence. So that's future initiatives. I'm sorry, and future incentives. The Big Five initiatives, I won't go too deeply in. This goes back to the Big Five things we're focusing on, kind of aligned to the standard-based grading pieces, aligned to a lot of what we're trying to do around building the future for our kids with the computer initiative. So I won't speak too deeply in this, but I will show you the 5 slides that we look at that allow us to see the progress against those 5 big initiatives, and you will see a common color. What's the color you see a lot of? Red. It's natural. Beginning of the school year, we're still at the beginning of these, so I don't have a ton of updates for you on these 5 initiatives that are led district-wide, because we're just starting. On the operational side, the question always is, so how do you spend the money to get to do all these wonderful things, right? It seems like there's a lot of money, extra money being spent to get it done. But Josh has spent hours and hours with his team looking at spreadsheets, and there are just some raw numbers I want to point out so you can see how we're doing financially. If you look up here, there's a couple different buckets. I apologize for it being so small. It's broken down into the big buckets. 80% of any district is usually salaries. The rest is usually purchase services and there's other things around the fringes, to be general. Salaries in 2016 were alone about $41 million, almost $42 million. And by 2018, we're now up to $45 million. However, in between, you'll see from 16 to 17, which was 2 years ago, we grew at about a rate of 5.1%, so we were growing at a pretty healthy clip. Last year, we actually slowed. We actually made a savings. We created a savings. So we actually grew slower than we typically do. And that growth is attributed to the 2.5% that people get like annually, and additional benefit pieces that actually wrap into that. Is that right, Josh? What's the second piece?
You have the steps that are built into the contract,
Steps, sorry.
and then, yeah, you also have the negotiated increase for the salary itself.
Right, so negotiated piece plus the steps equals that 3.54% growth. Slowing growth, right, which is important because we're in a position where we constantly have to be fiscally conscious of what we're spending our money on. Another big question is we're spending more on administrative staff. We have all these new deans and all these other pieces. If you look at FY17 versus FY18, FY17, again, prior to the deans and all the new staff coming on, we were at about $7.69 million per year just for that staff. If you look at FY18, we're at 6.9. So we actually decreased by 10% in spending on admin, right? So the narrative that we're spending more is actually not true. There's the numbers. The rest, again, are benefits and things that annually kind of increase over time. The best part of this is just look at the bottom line and look at the rate in which our expenditures are going up. We cut the rate in which we were growing or spending in half. Just so you have that information as well. Any questions around finances?
Can you just explain how that could be when we have so many more administrators than we've ever had that we're not spending?
Sure.
More?
The next slide. Sorry. Shouldn't have access there. So a few things. So great question. We built in time into the school year now, where I mentioned that those BLTs, RTI, and all those pieces, that was about 250, 260.
I mean administrators.
I'm going to get there. I'm
Okay.
trying to give you the gap. So we said, you know what? We're going to take away those meetings and create that savings so we can pay for positions. So that's how we did part of that. The second piece is we reduced the number of additional blocks that we had in the high school that were costing us about $6,500 a piece. And all of that money that we were spending on that, reduced that by, we had like 23, 24 extra blocks last year. I think we're down to 3 this year. So it creates a big savings. And for every ad, we made a subtraction. Specifically, this year we got rid of Avid. And we got rid of another big program that cost us all the Title I positions that were in place.
So it sounds like, this is just me speaking, and I am
Sure.
a teacher in the district, so I want to be honest. Sounds like you're putting more money in administrators, but you took away from the day-to-day needs of the children and the teachers. Because it looks like you took away their meeting time, you took away extra blocks from the students, and you took away title, which mostly was spent on the children.
Sure.
For administrators.
So let me give you those. Let's walk through each one of those. So we took away teacher time. Actually, we gave them more time.
Okay, explain.
So every Tuesday, early release is a half day. We didn't have this block of time last year. So instead of having a 45-minute meeting for BLT, another 45-minute for RTI, and another 45 minutes for PBIS, for example, that's 135 minutes of time we took away, right? In essence. We now have said, I think the last group that gets out is around 11:45 on early release, and they have until 3:30. So that math says to me, instead of 135 minutes, we now have roughly about 265 minutes for teacher time that we didn't have last year.
I'm just gonna bring something up. I'm
Okay.
just gonna be honest here, because I am a preschool teacher, so we have professional development, which is wonderful on those days.
Okay.
I'm not gonna be on PBS, I'm not gonna be on RTI, I'm not gonna be involved in any of this because I am mandated to go to this professional
Right.
development. So I see what you're saying, but in
Okay.
reality, I'm not quite sure if it's working. And I'm not quite sure if it's best for the students to only come 2.5 hours a day.
Right.
Feed them breakfast, feed them lunch, see you later, disrupt the parents. I'll be quiet now.
I'll add to
I
that
don't
too,
want to get tired.
because I have 3 children that go to Lorain City Schools. I have 2 in the middle school and 1 in the elementary school.
Sure.
I work, I'm a student also, so guess what? My girls didn't go to school on Tuesday because I have to go to class. I can't miss class. And it's very important for me to pass accounting too, for their future.
Sure.
So I had to keep them out of class. And they don't go to daycare, so they literally had a missed day of school.
Yep.
For
Yep.
what?
Yep.
And
So-
I agree. Like, I have 2 kids in school that's why I'm here today. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. You either give them a day off or have a full day, one or the other. But I think it's completely inconvenient. And it is not thought of by for the parents' sake, that you would drag my kids into school for 2 hours and then have the nerve to fit in breakfast and lunch.
Yeah.
For what? So I done drug my kids to school for 2 hours, I done wasted my time, got them dressed, and then they have to come right back home in 2 hours. There's nothing they were doing. His 2 hours in high school was free time. So you wasted my time. And so what will end up happening is, like she said, is so that I'm not inconvenienced, and so that I don't have to call off work, they won't go to school. So now they're penalized because they do like perfect attendance, they do like getting those awards, because, and I'm not saying that the teachers shouldn't get the extra time. I'm saying that they give them the day off then. Like, that's what they did last year, they had a day off.
Yeah. Well, last year we didn't have this structure. We didn't have of that and saying, like, we're putting our parents in a position once a month for a day to figure out childcare. We get that. And so we realize, and we appreciate that feedback, and we realize this is the first time we've done it in a couple years. So I think a few years ago we had early release Tuesdays, I believe.
And then they quit doing it because
Right.
it didn't work.
Yeah, so it's a thought of, what is the right balance of that, and what is the value of it. The good news is we also received and put out a survey to our teachers to get feedback on what could make that time better. So we review that feedback very sincerely, and the same thing, I'm glad parents are here so they can voice their concerns as well. If there is a way that we can move to a space where that's a full day off so that you don't have to drag your kids and all that good stuff, we will definitely evaluate that as well. But please know we're trying to meet 2 needs, right? We're trying to ensure, because the other situation we realize too, when we keep our kids out during the week, sometimes that's the only meal some of our kids get. And I would hate for some of those kids not to have that situation. Now, not all, but some. So just know that it may sound like it's an easy, quick fix and a solution, but there's a lot of moving pieces. But I definitely appreciate the 3 perspectives, I think, that I heard here from a parent and also from a teacher.
Did
The
you
other piece-
ask before you started that? Did you ask for community input into how they preferred to do this with these 2.5-hour days versus a whole day off?
Yeah, we didn't even explore the whole day because we were concerned about the number of hours we needed to make sure that we had 178 days. We made sure that we had the teachers union or teachers representation on the other side.
But
So
the
we moved to that. I know, I'm just answering both parts because someone said teachers over here. I just want to make sure I answer both parts. So that is what happened. I do think it is a conversation on how we approach it going forward, but the feedback is very, very helpful.
I wasn't asked.
Okay.
I
Well,
wasn't asked. I don't know how many people were asked if we would prefer to have full day off or partial day off.
Yeah, I think it actually went to vote by the teachers union. It had to be voted on, if I'm not mistaken.
No,
So,
no.
okay, I'll check with the
I don't
teachers
think we would
union.
have voted for this, honestly. Nobody I talked to.
That's interesting. I actually have an email saying confirming, so I actually have to check with our, yeah, that's not a problem.
What choice
Yeah,
did we have?
yeah,
No.
yeah.
Neither calendar choice offered that.
So you did vote?
If there was a calendar that was accepted by the union, it was because Either option did not provide.
So there wasn't, I'm confused, was there a
I
vote?
don't know.
Oh,
There's never
okay.
a whole union group vote.
Oh, okay.
The executive votes on
Oh,
the
I see.
calendars.
I see, executive votes on the calendar.
NBR, I think, but
Got
it's
it.
not put out for the,
Fair, fair. I assumed it was the entire, it was the executive,
or BR, I'm not.
I don't know who BL.
Building
representative.
Okay. That's okay, that's okay, yes.
When you refer to abbreviations, you need to explain it.
Sorry,
I
sorry.
don't think everybody knows all that.
Gotcha, I apologize. But that's helpful context, knowing that it wasn't something that it was an entire union vote. It was something that was, sounds like executive team or building reps. Okay, okay, very fair. But I want to finish your question,
Oh,
though.
boy.
Because I think this is also, it's really just I wish I had a chalkboard to kind of walk through how that all worked. So by moving away from title teachers, a number of them went to the classroom, which I think is awesome because we needed them in our classrooms. Some of them went on to be a dean. So by moving the title teachers to one of those positions, it actually created a savings because we just had a void. There's no folks in title, so that actually created a ton of savings there.
So we still have less teachers.
But less interaction with the
Less
students.
teachers per classroom.
Well,
per student.
actually, that's interesting you said that because right now, looking at our data, we have about 5,874 kids in butts and seats. Enrolled in our district are 6,674 kids, and as we look at the difference in that number, on average, we're down about 20 to 25 kids in every school building. So I had this conversation, and Jay and I have been working hand in hand to really think through this, and I told him that we're in a position, like if I were to just email him today, I said, Jay, we're down. Our enrollment is down. And if I had to go meticulously school by school, I would be able to cut at least one teacher from 8 out of 10 of the elementary schools, and in some cases 2 or 3 out of middle. And high school, right now our enrollment's down 369 kids. So if you take those numbers, those equivocate to teachers. I'm not touching them because I know the value of having that extra body in schools every single day. So even though it feels like there's less, please trust and believe that the numbers shake out and show that I should be actually reducing teachers right now.
Our classrooms are packed at my school.
Yeah. I would love to hear your school and what the classes look like and see where we are.
We don't have any extra bodies.
Yeah, I would love to hear and see. So I'd love to follow up with you later about that. So with that said, those are the shifts we made. The other piece that people don't realize, we had the role as assistant principal funded last year. They rolled over, the position kind of just allocated to deans. So when you look at the math, it actually matches out pretty well in a way that we actually created a little bit of savings along the way without minimizing the impact on schools from the school leadership piece. And given what I said around enrollment, being that it's down, I haven't cut teachers, we're still okay. Any other questions around that? Miss Lee?
Around that, but around, as you say, do you have a 2-3 year projection on where we will be financially in the next 2 years?
I have 5 years.
You have a 5 year, okay, that's even better.
Yeah, I have to produce a budget we have twice a year, and it'll be updated in October. So I just did an update in May. So every May and October I have to update that.
Okay, that's including staff, teachers,
Everything's in there.
everything?
Yeah.
And it hasn't been yet finalized, is that what you're saying?
Not for October, but May is available. I have May available on my website, on the school website, on my page.
Yeah, so perhaps if someone really wants to come in and see that and get
Oh,
that
yeah. I don't know if
information.
anybody, I'll sit down with anybody.
So we'll have an idea where we are 5 years from now, meeting or levy or whatever.
And actually, the numbers that he showed up there, when it comes to salaries, the one thing I want to point out is, on average, just based on contracts, the step and the percentage increase
Okay.
with a 2.5%, I mean, you're looking at a 4.5%, 5% increase just with that alone. So you're looking at that 5.17 is about the standard if you continue like normal year-to-year growth in salary number, and that's just like normal inflation. So to be dropping the 3.5% that we are, that's huge. To move that much percentage-wise and not grow at the extent, considering you still have the percent increases per all the union agreements and things like that, that's a big swing. And it seems like small because it's only percentages, but when you're talking about $45 million, that's a couple $1 million. And that's a big swing.
Big swing, and I think I really he needs to know that, and how
The other reality too, and again, go back to the iceberg, right? All the things that are happening underneath the tip of the iceberg. We also realize in a few years, the projection actually tells us a very different story around how our revenue will come in and how much money we'll actually have, and then it decline. So every chance that we're able to sit down, and Josh and I probably bump into each other in the hallway, I don't know how many times a day, to talk through these things, literally, we're trying to figure out how can we continue to shave a little bit off here, a little bit off here, because we realize we will be at a deficit at some point. And we have to do whatever we can to minimize that deficit given the current circumstances. Okay? Hence why you're seeing the reductions that we're trying to make over time. Lastly, something that's coming up soon, there's another piece around just newness of people. Sort of to your question, there's all these new administrators, we don't know who these folks are. We want to set up a space for our chiefs to come chat with you. Whether it be at a lunch or just a space where you might be eating, where we can just be a part of your environment and sit and talk with you. Last year I was able to get to a couple schools and have chat and choose with teachers at lunch, and I think the chiefs want to do a very similar and intentional piece where they can just talk to you, understand the challenges that you might be seeing or facing or hearing, so we can do something about it really quickly. Principals, I think, can attest to today when they had a restorative circle around some of the things that were discussed, went in with one understanding of what we were going to do, and then we came out with a very different one after hearing their feedback. And so that same intentionality is what we want to get from our teachers and our chiefs, being some of them all in this, ironically, in this front row and there in the back, will be a part of those conversations. We also started ignore that bottom quote there, but we also started just a FAQ space for people to give us some feedback on our questions that they have, and the only questions we really received were around teacher incentive and around that attendance piece. The big answer to all of this is it's proposed, and we have to wait until we hear back from the teachers union. So I don't know if it's executive or BR or the entire body, but that's...
Yeah, that'll be the entire body for that.
Okay, thank you. So we're just waiting for that before it goes into effect. That was the big question. But Sarah, where can they find...
It's on our website, and or you can email info at loraincityschools.org, or if you want to do the FAQ, it's on the website on your page.
On the Lorain Promise page?
Lorain Promise page.
Right, so 2 places. Go to Lorain Promise page, go to FAQ, or you can email info@lorainscsd.org to ask your questions, because we've reviewed those questions and hopefully get you those answers. Now, any additional questions or conversation from you? I know we answered a lot along the way, but is there anything else that you would like to speak to? Yes,
I wanted to
and then I'll
talk
come up
about
here.
some of the information that you're giving parents now as far as their feedback. How have you addressed this with parents so they'll understand what the numbers mean when they see them on that report card? Is there anything that you're going to offer them so, these are going to come out like next week, our interims. Will they understand what it is, since it really isn't even going into effect immediately? It hasn't been rolled out. And how will you bring them up to speed?
Yep. A few avenues. One, we want to be able to communicate here. We'll also make sure that this video is live so people can always review it. Our MAC team does a tremendous job of sending out information so parents can access this conversation. The third piece is we have something we're calling like the mini book for parents. It's about 2 or 3 pages on standard-based grading that we'll send out. The third piece is we also want to have conversations with our families that have questions. So we'll have some of those like, hey, I still don't understand this. We understand that this is new. Great, talk to us about it so we can help parents understand along the way. The good news is when you think about an interim, it's not the full-blown situation, it's just the interim, so they can have the chance to kind of understand it, grapple with it a little bit, ask us questions so we can improve. So that's the process that we're taking.
Okay, I just want to see a lot of opportunities for parents to get the answers.
Absolutely.
Before they start trying to deal with what does this mean anymore.
Yeah, I think in theory, how we've done the laptop days where we had like 11 different times where parents, that's the kind of the focus and attention we want to put on this very similar thing. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hardy, I know you've addressed this before, but could you address this to other people?
Sure.
As the reason why you have not yet attended a school board meeting?
Yes, absolutely. So why don't I attend a school board meeting? It's funny. There's a few reasons why. And if my computer was connected to the laptop right now, I've actually thought about it. I think a lot about adult psychology and how things work. And I went to this website just to research, like maybe I'm not thinking about this interaction the right way. And I went to a website that kind of outlined the tendencies of people that are attempting to put people in difficult situations. And I went to this, and it had these characteristics of people where name calling and spreading of misinformation and creating fear are indications of people who do those things, and you should not give those folks attention. Because when you do, you actually become going tit for tat in this situation, and I refuse to be in the middle of tit for tat, given all the things we have to work on. And so my thinking is, I would love to know after a board meeting, that it was a good conversation, and names weren't called.
Right? Productive?
Productive, right? Productive conversations, right? And unfortunately, some of those headlines and some of the things, quotes you see, I can't argue are productive. If I could see that they were productive and it seems like, hey, they're inviting a conversation that makes sense, that it will be fruitful, productive, I'll be open arms, be willing to talk with them. The second piece is, way back in October and November, I actually asked, hey, let's just talk. And I wish I can get to my email right now so I could show you this. I asked them, can we just talk? The response I received was, I don't have the authority to do it. Honest to truth. So there's been attempts to speak. There's been other attempts to just see and watch the actions. And we all know as adults, when you feel that you're going to be attacked, you're probably not going to walk into that room. And I don't want to be attacked. I don't want our folks that work so hard every single day to be attacked. And unfortunately, Josh is on the side of has to be the treasurer to make sure money is discussed, has to be there. But outside of that, I choose education over politics.
Did you ever try meeting with them?
Yes, I just
Previous.
mentioned. Yeah, so
Previous to your
Oh,
position.
absolutely. So way back in August, my first meeting when I was hired was with the board president. First meeting, got off my plane, ran to a meeting right on Oberlin Avenue at that restaurant. I can't remember off the top of my head. Had a meeting with him. Then we said, okay, let's have a couple successive meetings. We attempt to have those meetings, another ADC member, myself, and 2 board members. And at one point, I thought we came to just a kind of an understanding of how we could operate. It kind of flipped at some point for whatever reason. And I'm not placing blame.
Well, do you feel like you cut off their legs so they don't want to feel like, why should they talk to you? You took away all their ability to make decisions about how our district.
Unfortunately, I didn't take it away.
Well,
It
they're
wasn't.
placing, you in the position of the person they're going to blame for it.
Yeah, I understand that, and I completely get it from the side of the powers to be, whoever it might have been, put this House bill in place and took away and stripped away the authority of those individuals.
So with that
Hence,
sensitivity.
let me just finish if I could. And took away those authorities. Fair. At best. At worst, it's like, wow, we no longer have any ability to impact the well-being of our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And they bring in a person who's not from here.
Right.
And so all those factors I completely understand, and I empathize with our board who are experiencing that. I honestly am. I think the challenge that become, when we attempted to have these conversations last spring, it became very clear I'm on a clock, right? I understand that we have 5 years to impact change for kids, and we have 5 years to do it so that whatever the next legislation is doesn't become even more devastation than this one, right? And so I understand that I have time that I can dedicate to individuals to have these conversations. But then when, again, you read the headlines and see how things are kind of shaping up and what is said, you realize, man, that's really hard to keep going back and saying, you're a liar, and then walk up to them and say, you know what, let's have a conversation. So I say all that to say, I don't think there isn't an opportunity to continue to figure out how to build that relationship. But in all honesty, there is so much work to get done for our kids that I need to prioritize that. Yes, one more second, because I thought I saw the hand. Go ahead, Ms. Lane.
If we would go back and we're talking about House Bill 70, if you remember, a number of you here a number of years ago, when I stated the fact that it was coming, okay, and nothing was done in terms of stopping it. We did not band together, go to the legislature to let them know that we did not want this to happen and why it was happening. I think it's unconstitutional, the way and the process that was done, but that we had elected board members to be representative of our students and to see that they had the type of quality education that they needed, okay? But then no one did anything or said anything, so then when the state came in with the stress commission, then we wanted to, after the fact, and Dr. Hardy came here, even at the point that Dr. Graham, some of the things that Dr. Hardy is showing us, he showed and had the statistics to line up what was happening within our Lorain City School districts. The powers that be, and we know who they are, there is a move on, and it's still on, to privatize education. Once you all begin to let that sink in and what is going to happen then you will understand why all of this has come about. Stop and think and realize what's going on around us nationally. And this isn't something
What do you
that's
suggest?
Dr. Hardy's fault. My thing is that you can't blame him, you can't blame, but you don't begin to throw stones because it's the dereliction of our board members that we elected of their duties as it relates to our children. And I'll say that. And I am very unhappy about some of the things that I've seen, to the point where I wanted to cry. I have been out here, I won't tell you how many years, but it's something that we need to come together as a community and as parents. And believe me, you all sit here and you're talking about what's going on, but believe me, there's some mamas and papas out there I want to smack. Because they are not doing the things that I think they should be doing for their children in terms of getting these children educated, taking care of them and their needs. And that's where I'm coming from. That stuff out there that you see and that they're doing, and I will tell you, look at the real deal, okay?
Sir?
I guess just a quick question.
Yes.
Are there letters sent home to parents to let them know about these meetings? The reason I ask is because I normally come to your monthly meetings, and I think they're great. But most people I see in here, most of them are staff only. And so sometimes I feel like it's an easy way to ask a question that they don't get answered, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important for the parents to comment. I mean, be honest with you, I think some of the last few posts or newspaper articles were just negative to our community, and it had nothing to do with the schools. And so then the parents read that, read the social media posts, but this is an opportunity for them to come, but it's always staff here, it's not really a lot of parents, so how are they informed?
I'm actually curious. I want to turn it over to our MAC team in a second, but Mom, how did you find out about tonight's meeting?
I went to the website.
Website?
The Lorain City School website.
Okay.
And I was only looking for your presence in particular, and this one was your presence.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. So website is one. Mom, how did you find
I
out?
got a text notification on my phone.
Okay.
With a recording.
Oh, you got the text notification as well? Okay. So website, text notification.
I know a lot of parents in my neighborhood, their minutes ran out, so they might not get text. So just a normal letter, just a normal letter. Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Okay. So what I do hear, I mean, honestly, what I hear you saying, Councilman, is it is land, air, and sea. So we might have been able to get people to the website, might have gotten people by text message, but we should continue to reach out to them. I think there's a few other things that we have also done to make sure that we got it out to parents. And robocall, which may not answer the question, but there was a robocall also sent out about the event. Sir?
I just want to say a couple of things.
Yes, sir.
I really like what I see thus far in this change of administration. From previous years to now, I see a big improvement. One of the improvements that I see that I was real proud of was when we had the computer day, and that day we came to the auditorium and I saw all those computers up there. It felt like we were coming up with the world. That's the feeling I got, just being honest with you. I felt like we were a part of the world and we are learning the skills of today. That's one. Two, I feel like with the standards-based grading, because I have children in the district and I'm a teacher as well, so I see both sides. I'm glad to know that my child is learning something that means something. I don't want my kid to get a good grade because they brought a box of tissue to class. I'm serious. I mean, I'm just saying this because I'm being open and I'm not afraid to speak my mind, okay? But these are my real thoughts, okay? So, the state wants to know, can you do X, Y, Z? All I want to know is, can my child do X, Y, Z? Period. Nothing else. So these implementations of the standards-based grading, I'm really feeling that. I'm really understanding that. And I'm trying to implement it in my job as well, because I deal with special needs kids and it's kind of hard for them. But I'd rather them do less work with more rigor than to do more work with less rigor. And I'm really feeling that.
Great, thank you.
And the transparency. You have been more transparent than ever before in this district. And we can see that. I can see it. And that is big. That's huge to me, because it lets people know what's going on, why it's going on, et cetera, et cetera.
I appreciate that. And I really appreciate that for the folks that work in our office, who there are times when we feel like we're running 1,000,000 miles per hour and trying to do 1,000,000 things right, and work so hard, whether it's central office or our school buildings every single day, trying to do right by kids. So I thank you for saying that, more so for the people that are here who experience the challenges every day but realize the work does pay off for comments like that. Yes?
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm not a teacher and I'm not a parent. My friend who had to leave, we actually go into Success Academy
Great.
and mentor some of the girls in the program.
Thank you for doing that.
It's a blessing and a joy to do it. But my question is, I get to hear the teenage side of the program,
Yeah.
but coming from you, I was just curious as to, are they actually only there for half days? I'm hearing that they don't have a science teacher, so I was just curious to hear from your side
Yeah.
of view of what actually is going on and some of the changes that they're experiencing, because I know they seem a little upset about it, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to hear from your side too.
Yeah, and I think you're putting it very nicely. I think they're very upset for a lot of things. First day of school, I actually had a chance and sat with all of them to kind of hear their side. And let me just go back to last year, and I promise I'll come back to your question for this year. When I got here last year, I don't know, did you mentor last year as
Yeah,
well?
like the end of, more second semesters.
Okay. So you experienced the space that they were in
Yes.
last year. And more than anything that was devastating for me is for us to send kids there every single day and expect them to come out happy, joyful, and in a better place. It was just completely unfair. So step one, let's get them into a better space. Now, in that transition, I think the other challenge was we have to get them more resources. And we're still figuring that out, honestly. So to answer your question, do they have all the pieces they need and or deserve yet? We're getting there, we're not there yet. The first big step was getting them into a place where they can feel like I belong. The second piece was very important, and one of the first things they said, which was something we fixed pretty quickly, they said, well, look, we're in this space, at least give us our computers. Because they were fearful that they weren't even going to get computers. And within days, kids were getting their computers. Now, granted, there's a few that I even spoke to today. Jamie knows who I'm speaking to, who needs their parent to come in to help them get it. And we're trying to figure out a system to help them make sure they get their technology and the things that they deserve. The third piece around their schedule was actually created to do a couple of different things. For some of our kids, the reality is they're also working. They're in another space. And we try to create a schedule to entice them enough to come to school, because to be honest, I think there's 138 kids that are on the books for Success Academy, and on any given day, it's about 45 that actually show. I mean, you're there, you see how many are there, right? And so we were trying to find a way, we'll say, you know what, we're gonna shorten this day and we're gonna help you get to work. Literally, like find you jobs. Has it worked yet? Not yet. honestly.
Yeah.
But it's a work in progress. We have two dedicated individuals to help with that. One of them is in the back of the room, Mr. Montague, who is helping us build the culture there. The second is Coach McFarland. And if you know anything about Coach McFarland, he can motivate people, right? And so when you have those two gentlemen motivating our kids to come to school and then helping them find jobs, it's a powerful match. So we're working with, and I'm blanking on the name of the organization, Mr. Garvey, but through Mike Luongo, who's helping us identify jobs for our kids. So it's intentionally that they get the credits they need and get them to work. What's that? Ohio Jobs, thank you. So that's the work in progress. The other piece that we realized, this is the third tier to this, some of our kids are literally a credit or two away. And so for them to spend their entire day getting a credit or two and then just hanging out is probably not the best thing. So let's get them to a space where they can be more productive. The other reality is there's a number of kids who said, you know what, I want to be in the high school. So I want to work my butt off to show that I can do it here so I can now get to the high school. So all of that is going on in this transition, while also realizing another sad reality in this. A number of our kids are saying they have 16, 17 credits, but when they find out the credits that they actually need to graduate are in the single numbers of 5 and 6 of the 16, they're heartbroken. And I honestly believe that wouldn't have come about if we didn't make this transition and get them closer to the high school. So I know it's an indirect way to answer your question, but I think those are all the pieces that surround the transition.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
You're very welcome, anytime. Anyone else? 7 Mississippi, 8 Mississippi. All right, so I want to stop there. And in all honesty, you know, to go back to where we started, change is hard, but it's necessary and needed if we're really in this to make sure that our kids are successful. And I'm so proud to see the village that came tonight to talk about this and have a dialogue, whether it was, we weren't always happy, but there was moments where we were honest. And that goes a long way for us to get where we need to be. So I appreciate all the voices that share the perspective. Whether or not the answer was the one you wanted to hear, please know it was just the honest one. So I thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for sharing in honesty. Have a safe trip home.
This has been a production of Lorain City Schools TV 20 WLCS.